Hey, welcome to the Expect Success podcast, where we highlight real estate as an investment and speak with professionals who make it happen every day. Today is going to be a little bit of a different segment because we're speaking with someone who has taken down his first multifamily deal, and he's going to tell you all about his experience. So welcome, Jinil Patel. Have you introduced yourself really quickly?
Eric, thanks so much for having me, man. I'm kind of excited to be here. I know we spoke early on in the process, and it was towards the early stages, and now we're across the finish line, and I'm just excited to share my experience.
Yes, and that's what I definitely want to spend the bulk of our time talking about is your experience with it being your first deal, a little bit about your background, where you came from, because you already are an accomplished businessman in your own rights. So I want you to walk us through the journey of making the shift from being an entrepreneur in one space and then seeing the need to go into multifamily or real estate investing as a whole. So can you start and tell us a little bit about your background and what led you into real estate?
Yeah, so my background's primarily been restaurants and restaurant operations. As you know, it's an everyday thing. What primarily made me shift my focus is getting into multifamily to be, to have a little bit more flexibility with my time, to be able to spend time with family and restaurants. It's every day. The minute you wake up until the minute you go to sleep, anything can go sideways. I've had calls come in at midnight saying a printer isn't working. And so I'd have to get out of bed and go fix this printer. Uh, and with multifamily, having the right property manager in place, it kind of helps you not have to worry about all these little details and being bothered by phone calls.
Okay. And even though you are early in the journey, I know a little bit more about your story than most. So, uh, have you found your real estate investing journey to be that much different across the board, or are there some similarities?
There were some similarities. I think the fact it was our first large deal that we took down, I think it was very similar early on. But as you know, once you actually cross the finish line, the momentum shifts and your focus shifts, and it's a different feeling once you actually cross the finish line. Now you don't have all that extra stress, and you're able to take a step back, maybe take an extra day or two off. But again, that's the difference between restaurants, right? You get done with Super Bowl weekend, and then you have to wake up the following Monday morning to just go in and make pizzas. So that's a never ending. But multifamily, definitely the journey until closing is extremely stressful, but upon closing, I think there's a lot of flexibility with time and the amount of stress.
Okay. Now let's take a step back because you did mention restaurants, and that's where your primary background in is in. So give the listeners and everyone watching a little bit more background because you mentioned pizzas, but you didn't say everything. So just I want to hear your story, like your heartfelt story of I'm doing this. This was supposed to be my plan. I have a different vision for my future now because you are a new father, and what I'm sure that was part of what sparked the change. But talk about your mindset shift and the steps you had to go through to still run your operation, having two locations, but also take down your first deal. And I'll ask you questions along the way to make sure we're hitting the very pertinent and poignant parts that I know we have talked about off camera.
Yeah, no. So I think originally my plan was, I kind of stopped going to college, and I just got into the restaurant business. I always saw myself as expanding to maybe five, even 10 locations, long term. But again, I think this was 10 years ago. I started running my first store when I was 19. I was working open to close every day. And I always said, listen, 10 years later, this is not how it's going to be. Unfortunately, 10 years later, it is exactly how it was 10 years ago. And so my mind really shifted was when, how can I make sure, I can have enough passive income coming in to where I don't have to be at the restaurant every day to make sure that, I'm paying the bills. And then I got married. And then, as you know, 6 months ago, we had a beautiful baby boy. And now, once he comes into your life, you're just like, I never want to leave the house again. The only time I want to leave is if
Yes.
he's taking a nap. So the only option there really is to buy yourself time is really just through apartments. And so I said, listen, I've done single family, I've done the duplex, the triplex, the Airbnb. All of that is great, but again, those also, because of the quantity, you can't have a good property manager to be able to pay yourself, right? Because there's a lot of times when you have a property manager for a single family house, there's pretty much nothing. But when you're managing it yourself, you seem like you're always getting calls or emails, hey, this went wrong, that went wrong. And so to really be able to, get a good property manager, it's all about what's in it for the property manager. And it's volume, right? The more units you have, the more money you're bringing in because you're paying a percentage. So the more money you're able to pay a property manager, you're going to have somebody more reliable who's more focused on the day to day. And so that's when I really focused on, okay, it has to be apartments. Single families is not going to get me there. So after we close this one, it feels as if now the property manager is handling all the day to day. Again, we just closed a couple weeks ago, so I do talk to the property manager on a daily basis, but that's just a quick 15-minute phone call. Opposed to pizza, right? It's 14 hours a day. Doesn't matter the situation, whether it's hot out, it's cold out, if it's Halloween or it's the slowest day of the year, everything is still the same. And so that's what really made me change my focus to apartments.
Okay. So Jay, now like you already mentioned the reason why. So take us through once you made the decision, multifamily apartments is going to be the game for you. And it's still a volume game, whether even single family homes, it's a volume game, whether you have property managers, multifamily, same thing. It's a volume game. Take us through now that you made the decision. What was your first step to start going towards that goal? Did you join a mastermind? Did you start researching on your own first and realize I can't do this on my own? Talk us through that part of the process.
Initially, I watched a lot of YouTube videos, I listened to a lot of podcasts, I gathered as much knowledge as I possibly could. And believe it or not, I even did approach one or two deals on my own. Um, and I realized that it's not just what you can acquire. And, that was almost 2 to 3 years worth of watching YouTube videos. And that was on an every single
Goodness.
day basis. It was every single day. I would spend 2 hours watching YouTube videos. Okay, what can I learn from each video? Gathered enough knowledge. And then that's when I had approached these deals on my own. And I realized, okay, there's more to it. And so then I actually joined a mastermind to really help fill those gaps of knowledge that I did not have. Joining that mastermind helped fill those gaps. And then with that knowledge, that's when I started pursuing more real estate deals and was able to really get across the finish line.
All right, and we know that when you join a mastermind, you have that weight behind you and that knowledge and those people to pull from their experiences. It definitely boosts your confidence and makes it seem more real. Okay, so you went in the right step. You invested in yourself and your education. What does your day to day start to look like after you join the mastermind? Because once I know we both know this, passive investing in the beginning is nothing but passive. So what does your day-to-day operations start to look like that? And talk about it in tandem with also still running the restaurants.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it was still a lot of joining a lot of meetings, talking to a lot of people. Believe it or not, I can't tell you how many people I would actually talk to while I was at the restaurant making pizzas. I would ask the person I was talking to on the phone, hey, can you hold on a second? I got to take this order over the phone. And they'd be like, oh, sure, not a problem. So I would literally put them on mute, take care of this phone call, unmute, resume my call, and then I would continue making the pizza. And so I really did that for about 12 to 15 months of being at the restaurant every day because I wasn't actively working on a deal. So I wasn't really working towards closing, right? I was just working towards gaining knowledge. And so I couldn't just step away from the restaurant business while I was just gaining knowledge. Once the knowledge started coming in and we started tackling this deal, at each hurdle, I think I started to take one small step back from the pizza restaurant. As we got closer to closing date, I was able to take enough time off from the restaurants just so this way I can focus more on closing because it was more the time was spent achieving something that I would have never thought I would have been able to do. And that's the only reason why I would ever step away from the restaurant, right? It's because the restaurant was initially paying all of my bills. And the only way I was stepping away from the restaurant is if there was something else that I was working to replace my income. And that was really just closing a deal.
Okay. And now you said you spent 12 to 14 months working on your education. Uh, so when did you start actually analyzing deals and looking at deals and speaking with brokers or sellers, even on off market deals? At what point in that journey did you start that part of the process?
Yeah, believe it or not, it was approximately 12 months ago today. right around early May, end of April was when I really started reaching out to a lot of brokers, analyzing just a lot of deals that I knew weren't going to make sense. But just to give myself that confidence and knowledge of underwriting, I was underwriting deals that I knew weren't even going to make sense. But I wanted to know, why didn't it make sense? And after I figured out why it didn't make sense, I would ask myself, okay, how could I make this deal make sense? And after I figured that out, I realized how off I was from what the seller wanted, and realized, okay, yeah, this is why this deal doesn't work, is because, for example, the seller wants 2.5 million, but this deal, I can really only pay 1.5 million. The seller's not going to entertain that. And so I figured out the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And then once I was able to, talk to enough brokers, and this is, I'm talking every single day. It wasn't just once a week or, hey, shooting an email. No, it was talking to a broker. The goal was to at least be able to talk to 3 brokers every single day and try to underwrite 3 deals every single day. Just so this way I can excel, right? There's a lot of people that will, they want to excel, but they will do one deal a week, one phone call a week, and that just prolongs the process, right? It has to be an everyday hustle. So it's motivation. How do you get out of bed and say, even though I'm nowhere, how am I going to keep pushing forward? And that's what it all came down to. And so it was an everyday thing. And then eventually we found a broker he was nice enough and willing enough to work with us. And we were able to get to a purchase price that made sense for us and the seller. And rest is history, like they say.
Was that an on market deal or off market deal?
I believe it was on market. It was on market, but I think it was on market for some time, which kind of gave us the ability to come in there and really negotiate the price. I have a very strong belief in that, is because the seller quickly realized, after months of it being listed, that, listen, I think we need to wiggle on the purchase price, and so it kind of worked out in our benefit.
All right. So you built a relationship with the brokers. You put in the time to educate yourself. You put in the time and consistency of doing the daily tasks that you saw as high value to get to your goal. And you form that relationship with the broker and the seller and said, this is what I'm going to do. This is what we're going to do. I'm sending in an offer. Now, when you sent in that offer, did you already have investors ready to go? Or is that something you had to do after the deal was signed? Did you have any investors in place, anyone on your team with the money prior to sending that LOI?
So I did have some feelers out there. I won't say they were committed, but they knew what I was doing. And they said, when the time came, please let me know. Again, out of all those conversations I had, I was only able to secure one investor. And I'm talking, there were dozens of people that were out there that kept telling me, hey, we're ready, we're ready, we're ready. Until you're under contract and it comes time to pull the trigger, that's when you realize that no matter how many conversations you have, until the money doesn't come into your bank account, they're not committed. They are not committed. So that was a big life lesson. Is you talk to dozens of people that are in your personal network, so they're not strangers that I had initially committed. They were people that were in my network. I knew them personally. They knew me personally for years, and they initially said, "Hey, we're on board when you have a deal." But out of all of those, I was only able to commit one investor. The rest had
Okay.
fallen off.
So explain to me a little bit about that, because that's one thing I struggle with. I am not a big fan of reaching out to my personal network, and I'm very transparent about that. Uh, what gave you the confidence, and what stage of your journey were you in to reach out to your personal network, say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing this no matter what, and explaining your game plan when you at that point probably didn't even really have a game plan to pique that interest. How was that process?
It was not easy. It was very hard, but I'm like this. I've slowly become this person where I have set my ego aside, and I have no shame anymore. I will call and talk to any person, tell them exactly what we're doing. Hey, if it makes sense for you, we'd love for you to be a part. But again, it's hard because, your personal network, they're always the people that I hate to say it like this, but they're more like a bandwagon. They want to see you get it done first, but they're
Absolutely.
not willing to ride with you in case something goes sideways. They always want to see you succeed first. And so that was my ultimate goal, really, was I knew they weren't going to invest in my first deal. I just did. But I wanted to make a stepping stone of, I wanted to let them know what I was doing so this way they could monitor my progress on their own, because I'm sure they will. I posted on Facebook, hey, we closed this deal. Everybody I reached out to now, everybody knows I have closed this deal. So when I go out to the second one and I make one post and says, hey, listen, guys, I got another deal. Who's interested? And I am sure I will get a lot more returns. Some might wait for the second deal, some might wait for the third, fourth, or fifth, but I am going to make sure I do everything in my power to make sure they are aware of what my progress is, whether directly or indirectly.
Yes, and I don't want anyone to gloss over what he just said because that is so true. People say that your haters are your biggest followers, but in this case, it's not about haters. It's about people who watch. They just wait in the wings and they watch silently to see the progress. And it seems kind of almost if they need to have confidence in your ability and believe in your dream, and they only do it by seeing it happen. And then they want, like you said, bandwagon, they want to be a part of it. And I think it really has less to do with you and what you're doing and their confidence and their belief. And they have to first be dragged along through the process to have that belief. And once they do, it's like, okay, this is something I can be a part of. So I totally understand that. But that also opens up a new set of challenges for you as someone trying to take down a multifamily syndication deal as a GP. So your journey was not one that closed quickly. So walk us through some of the roadblocks that you hit from getting that um, PSA in place and getting that after that first investor, getting the other investors, and also to closing. Just walk us through some of those roadblocks, challenges. And also, one thing I want to focus on too, because knowing you and having a lot of conversations with you, I want you to also highlight your mindset in there because you've had some really tough challenges. And through those challenges, I've never once seen any difference in your personality and in your resolve. So I just want you to include a little bit of your mindset through the steps as well, because uh, it's been amazing to watch.
Yeah, I think one of our biggest hurdles, just deal related, was, I think we locked up the deal, but, as you know, the interest rates were fluctuating quite a bit. And we had the confidence in the deal and what we were going to execute, but we needed to make sure that the interest rate was going to favor our deal. Initially, when we had underwrote it, we were underwriting at 6.5%, and that was conservative because at the time, the interest rates were 5.8%. As we got closer and we executed the PSA, the rate slowly went up to as high as I think 7.75, and so we had to put in money to really extend this deal, because we didn't want to lock the rate in at 7.75. That just doesn't make sense. So we put up, I believe, 1 to 2 extensions until the rates came down, and we were able to secure a rate that was going to make sense for us. And that was, believe it or not, the biggest hurdle. After that, I think it was a lot of explaining to people that are in our network that aren't active investors in apartments. That is the biggest hurdle. Not a lot of people understand how investing in apartments really works. They it's more of a long-term growth, right? And it's passive. And so really diving deep and helping people understand the knowledge of, the benefits of investing in apartments and the tax advantages and how the compounding effect is what really is the long-term goal. And I think it was one investor after another, but I think it was for every 20 no's I had, I think I would eventually get a yes. And then, so that was a very long process. I think I spent months of talking to, 10 to 15 investors daily, and, trying to help build their confidence in me in my first big deal. That's probably the most challenging part, is how can you ask somebody to put confidence in you when you're doing it for the first time? So, you'll get 20, 30, 40, 50 no's before you get that one final yes. And, that was
Absolutely.
quite challenging. And, as during this whole journey, I think my life turned upside down, but I still had to keep pushing forward. It was, 6 months ago, our baby boy was born, as you know, and then unfortunately 4 days later, my dad had passed, and we were still approaching deadlines, and you know every ounce of my body wanted to say, you know what, forget this. just do what you're doing, and because your life wasn't any different. But I'd have to wake up every morning. As there's a couple of great athletes that I watch their videos on a regular basis, one being Kobe Bryant and another being Tom Brady. And they always said one thing: it is it is easy to give it your all when your mind is in it. But those that want to succeed and make a difference are the ones that wake up when they're the lowest of the low, and wake up and say, I'm going to do it anyways and keep pushing forward. And I think that's what really sets a lot of people apart is, can that individual, when they're at their lowest, can they still wake up, look at themselves in the mirror and say, I'm going to keep pushing forward? And if you're able to do that, I think you're able to do really anything. And so that was my
That
mindset every day. When I would wake up, I would remind myself, I can't, I told you before, I mean, I would wake up every day wanting to quit and just say, I was fine making pizzas. I was fine making pizzas. But there was a part of me that said, no, I can't quit. I got to see it through. I have to see it. I'm going to push until I can't push anymore. And I kept pushing until we crossed the finish line. So maybe I had a little bit more in me still. I don't know how much more, but I'm sure I had a little bit more in me to keep going.
you obviously did. You obviously did. And that's so important because that comfort zone is the liar. That comfort zone tells us the lies and tells us that you're okay, even when you know you're not, and everything is in you is telling you there is more, there's more. And your comfort zone is saying, no, it's not. You're fine right here. What are you doing? Everything was great. So it takes a lot to have not only the mind shift, but to stick to itness, to stay in the fight and keep going. Uh, Really quickly, like you were mentioning about the investors and having those conversations. How did you come up with the investors? Like, other than obviously your network, what were those conversations like? How did you start them? How did you meet people to even start the conversation to get them on board as an investor or potential investor?
Believe it or not, so not only my personal network, but then I slowly started reaching out to Facebook groups, and then even LinkedIn. Believe it or not, I think one of my biggest success was I even got my wife on board. And anytime we were going out to dinner, she's a very outgoing person. She'll talk to anybody. It doesn't matter if you're 6 months old or if you're 600 years old. She'll talk to you the same exact way. And believe it or not, I've actually, she helped us secure almost 500,000 just by us going out to dinner and her just talking to people and telling them what we're doing and how we want to, keep progressing, and how she thought it was a great opportunity for them to be on board. And believe it or not, she helped me secure 500,000. And so I would say, without her, I don't think we would have ever raised enough.
That is awesome. That is definitely awesome.
Yeah.
Wasn't even aware of that. And actually,
Yeah.
one of the questions I had written down for you: at what point did your wife look at you in the process and say, "You're crazy. Why are you doing this"? Was it early on? Was it in the middle, or at all?
Oh, the entire time. Until the entire time, until the last day of closing, um, until I told her, "Listen, I'm driving to go to get the keys." And she's like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah." I'm like, "We're driving to go to get," I'm like, "I'm going to get the keys right now." And so up until we didn't close, she was just like, there's no way you're raising, over $1 million. Why would anybody give us $1 million? And then so, I spent the time to help her learn how apartment investing makes sense. And she was just like, well, why aren't more people doing it? And it was crazy how she just took the time to really understand it and believe in apartment investing and believing in long-term growth. And initially it went from, why would anybody give you anything, to, why wouldn't anybody give you anything? And so I think knowledge was the biggest factor there. But to answer your
Absolutely.
questions, she thought I was crazy the entire time
That's
until I
awesome.
was driving to go with keys.
But she was still a big supporter and helped you raise the money. So that,
Yeah,
still stuck in as a partner the whole way through. That's awesome.
that's it. I mean, we were both pushing every day, even though she thought I was crazy. She thought we would never close. And yeah, we would go out to dinner on a Friday night, Saturday night. Before I realized that I'm going to go to the bathroom, or I take the baby for a quick walk because he's crying before the food comes. And before I realize this, she's talking to like a 70, 80-year-old couple that come to realize they invest in our deals.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So, with all of that being said, the process was longer than what you expected and what the seller expected. How many extensions did you get?
I believe we did 3 official, and then when our deadline to close, we showed the seller our confidence in closing and that we just needed another week. So on the day our closing date extension was going to expire, we were thankful enough that the seller was able to give us one more week. We told them all we need is a week. They gave us 30 days. They gave us an extra 30 days for an extension, and we said, "Listen." And it was literally Friday like today, and we said, "Listen, next Friday at this time, I'm like, we're going to close." At this point, I still didn't even know we were going to close. I still didn't know. But it's a confidence game, right? As I gave them the confidence that we were going to close. And guess what? That next Friday came and we did end up closing. So to answer your
Yes.
questions, it was almost a total of 100 days worth of extra extensions.
Which brought it to how many days total?
100 days, 100 days.
100 days
So it
total,
was,
not
yeah,
extensions, but
yeah, just extensions, just extensions. So the extension itself was 100 days, but up until the extension was another 90 days. So from execution of contract to closing was approximately 180 plus days.
that's the number I wanted right there. And that takes a lot of resolve to stick through that. But it also speaks a lot to your confidence and your people skills, because how many sellers are going to stick it out that long with someone, which you start off as strangers. It's not like you had a previous relationship. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'll give you some time. But I think it wasn't so much that a lot of factors lined up for you, like it being on market for a while and the seller having to admit, that his price was a little too high and come down. I think it had everything to do with you and your personality. He saw something in you, just like I think anyone who meets you does. They see that confidence, they see that attitude, and like, this is somebody I want to work with. So it really speaks to you as a person, and you're just your personality and your mindset, which I try to pull from you as much as possible. Because the day you actually did close, just for everyone listening, he called me and said, bad news, it didn't close. And I got an immediate pain in my chest because, being along with for the ride throughout the whole fight, that was very jarring to hear. But thankfully, he was just joking, and he did close. So, and even with that being the case, so let's bring it back. Even with that being the case, and you closing on that deal, you didn't just stop and take a vacation and go to Tahiti and kick your feet up. It was pretty much right back in the fire. And during that whole process, you were already still looking at other deals. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're actually getting ready to be under contract on a 16 unit deal, and we got a couple other in the pipelines that we've made some quite aggressive offers, and I think that the sellers are they're long time holders, and I understand and I respect the fact that when you've held something for so long, it takes a while to absorb. Like, okay, I may be selling this. I've held
Absolutely.
on to my restaurants for 11, 12 years, and I feel the same way when someone says I want to buy, and I'm like, man, I've spent 12 years. Am I ready to let this go yet? And so I totally understand there. So the other two deals in the pipeline, I think they're going to be, they're going to be a minute because I want to give the sellers enough time to absorb the fact that they might be letting them, letting their deals go that they've spent their entire life on. And so we're in no rush. That's why we're tackling this 16 unit deal. Again, it's in my backyard as always. I always like to find something that's just within an hour and a half drive. And we're excited about that one. I think it's going to be a quick close, thankfully. Not another 180 days, but I think it's going to be a quick close, and it'll be nice because we can focus on that while we let the sellers absorb their other two deals.
And one thing we didn't mention throughout this whole conversation, which, being in a mastermind myself, uh, having the conversation with other people that are newbies and starting out, it's always the intimidation factor. It's the size of the number of the deal. Not used to dealing with, me coming from a single home family home investing background, not used to dealing with numbers that start with million, and the size of the units, because even again, dealing with one property, you want to do something that feels closer to familiar with what you've done. And throughout this whole thing, we didn't mention that it's a 48 unit in Lansing, Michigan. So it's not like you went inside, let me stay in my comfort zone and go for a 7 unit, or, something just 1 or 2 units above residential. So like a 5 or 6, 7 unit, you went straight to where most people are intimidated to go. So that is, again, speaks to your resolve, and you had a goal and you set out and accomplished it. So now that it's closed, your day to day is going to look drastically different. You're still going to be deal sourcing as you already are, and now you'll be actively managing the property management. So, has any of that begun already?
Oh, absolutely. I think since we have closed, I made it clear with our property manager that the first 90 days do expect a call from me every single day at the end of the day for an update to see how things are going. And um, I'm still doing that every single day. A quick 15 to 20 minutes is all I ask from the property manager because I want an update on, what's going on, how are the renewals coming, what's happening next. Believe it or not, just earlier this week, I made a drive out. We had we have a repair coming up on the exterior of our building, and our property manager got a couple of quotes of from contractors that are within his own network. And believe it or not, I didn't like the pricing, so then I took my own contractor and I drove all the way out there and to show him to get a, believe it or not, a better an aggressive quote. So we're going to end up going with him, but it's still an everyday challenge. But again, talking to a property manager 30 minutes a day is nowhere near as running a pizza place for about 12, 14 days. Oh, sorry, 12 to
Absolutely.
14 hours a day.
Absolutely. And you did end up replacing the existing property manager, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And how did you make the decision to go with the property manager that you chose? What was that process like?
So, believe it or not, so the property management company that we chose, they have been around for 30 years. The current owner has owned it for about, I believe, 7 years. But I spoke to the original property manager that actually started the property management company, who is a gentleman that actually is a local investor himself. He owns about 450 units, and so I know how they even came up with the name. And so he told me the story about how it started, what their vision was, what their goal was, how he decided to sell to this guy. And that owner now is managing his 456 units. And he said he's been doing a phenomenal job. Even before we executed the property management agreement, I drove to Lansing half a dozen times. I met him at his office. Met him at a property he was touring. I took him out to lunch, to dinner, picked his brain because I wanted to know who he was as a person. I would text him at just random days out of the week. I would text him on a weekend. I would text him before hours, after hours. I wanted to see what kind of responses he was going to give me, or was he going to ignore me altogether? And so all those factors took into play, is, do we have a property manager who's hungry? If I text him, is he going to wait 24 to 48 hours to respond to me? Or is he going to text me back right away? And if he isn't able to text me back right away, what's his reasoning? And so a lot of those factors, I took into consideration before selecting our property manager. And, this gentleman, he, he checked every box that we had.
That is awesome, man. You're giving away a lot of behind the scenes information that I don't think a lot of newer investors even think about. And we all go into it with the mindset of this being eventually, passive income, but you're showing just how active it needs to be in the beginning and just how deeply you need to look at things. It's not as easy as looking at an online directory or asking your neighbor or other investors who they use. It's the day-to-day groundwork and the extra mile to see, and that your mindset is perfect on that. You're putting them to the test in such mild and respectful but very telling ways. If so that's I think that's a very big nugget people need to pull from this, is that think just beyond your expectations. Think just beyond what you thought it would be. I'm just going to call a few, see if I like their answers. How many properties are they managing right now? You took it a step further, and that really solidified your confidence in them, but also solidified a relationship. Again, I think that's the key word throughout all of this, is it is relationships. We all know this is a team sport, but for you to involve relationships in every aspect of it shows more than just your business plan, but it's the human level execution of all of it. So
Oh,
that's obviously
absolutely.
some kudos to you. So,
Absolutely. Thanks,
well, just
Aaron.
want to wrap it up. Absolutely, man, it's definitely well earned. So, just to wrap it up, wanted to ask you, what does the future look like for you as far as investing, and how do you see your two franchise locations being a part of that future?
Uh, so definitely plan to close more deals. I think we're at 48 units now. I think I said, I told myself at the beginning of the year was, listen, if I close this deal, I'm going to make it a goal to get to 200 by the end of the year. And so that is still the active goal, and that's why I haven't taken any time off. Is if a good deal lands on my lap, listen, I'll take a vacation when good deals aren't landing on my lap, because there will be plenty of times. And when you think about it, let's say I take a vacation now and I ignore the deals that are, coming on my lap. And then 3 months down the line when I come back from a vacation and I'm waiting for a good deal and they're not coming, you know what I'm going to tell, I'm going to beat myself up for not tackling the deals when they were available. So that's why right now it's good deals. We're just going to tackle them. We'll take a vacation later. There'll be a time. And as for the restaurants, I think we're gonna stick with it for now. We'll see where it
Oh,
lands,
okay.
but we're gonna stick with it for now.
Okay. You definitely are very aggressive, and that is not a bad thing. It's obviously paying off for you in very big ways. And I'm just glad I get to be along for the journey and see it in such close proximity, because it it's very inspiring. Absolutely very inspiring. So Jay, what's the best way for people to connect with you and follow your journey like I am?
I think LinkedIn is the best way right now. I think we're actually in the process of building our website and a landing page that I would ultimately share on our LinkedIn. Along with the website, I think it's going to show the projects that we have completed, what are the upcoming projects, what kind of returns investors can expect, and ultimately how they can join our list and just stay up to date. And if they come across an opportunity that makes sense for them, they can book a call with me directly just with the click of a button. Because as I love talking to people. I'm always on the phone.
Yes. Yes. And connect with the one in LinkedIn is just your name, Jinil Patel.
That is correct.
Okay, and I'll put everything on the lower third, and we'll add it to the video for people watching. I just wanted to say that for people that are listening as well. Now, Janelle, I really appreciate your time. Your story is inspiring, and I learned even more about you than I already thought. More than I didn't know, I thought I knew. So this has been very eye opening, and a lot of things you've mentioned, I'm going to implement into my own business plan, because it's a very much needed part that I think again gets overlooked and not discussed. Uh, all the information we get, even if it's higher level, is still generic to some point.
Oh,
There's not anything that I've listened to or watched that said talk to a property manager the way you have, to interact with them the way you have. So that is something that I think everyone should implement into their game plan in this business or anything else.
absolutely. They always say um, you have to be willing to do the hard work up front if you want it to be easy towards the end. If you don't, if you try to make it easy right from the beginning, you'll always be struggling for the long run. It's if you want the long run to be easy, you have to struggle in the beginning. That's just how life works, unfortunately. I wish there was a different way.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I definitely appreciate your time, and I appreciate everyone listening. And remember, with a game plan and consistent action, you too can expect success. Thank you, Janelle.
Absolutely, Eric, and hopefully we'll talk soon again.
Definitely will.